The alarm rang at 5 in the morning, the same tired sound that had woken Ellie Bennett every day for the past 3 years. She lay still for a moment, staring at the cracked ceiling above her bed, listening to the distant hum of the city outside her window. The radiator hissed like it was struggling to breathe. Somewhere below, the laundromat machines thumped in a slow, mechanical rhythm. Ellie reached for her phone with heavy fingers. The first thing she checked was the hospital portal. No new messages. No alerts. Her mother was still alive. That single fact was enough to make her swing her legs over the side of the bed. She moved through her tiny apartment on autopilot, brushing her teeth, pulling her hair into a tight bun, slipping on the same worn coat she had owned since college. The mirror reflected a version of her she barely recognized. Hollow eyes, tired skin, and a strength that came from necessity rather than choice. Outside, New York was already awake. Taxi horns echoed between buildings, steam rose from subway grates, and strangers rushed past her without seeing her. Ellie blended into them, just another face in the crowd, carrying dreams no one would ever guess. By 7, she was seated in the back of her Latin seminar at Columbia. Her notebook was open, filled with careful handwriting and small annotations in the margins while other students scrolled on their phones. Ellie listened. Really listened. Every word felt like a lifeline, reminding her that she was still more than her circumstances. When class ended, she packed her books slowly. She always lingered, savoring the quiet dignity of the academic world before returning to reality. Then she descended into the subway, where the air smelled of metal and sweat, and headed downtown. By evening, she stood inside the Gilded Lily, tying an apron around her waist. The restaurant glowed with gold light and whispered conversations. Crystal glasses clinked the scent of truffle, and wine hung in the air. Here, money spoke louder than words. Ellie became invisible. Guests waved her over without eye contact. They spoke over her, through her, past her. She smiled because she had to, because her mother's life depended on it. During her break, Ellie slipped into the narrow hallway behind the kitchen. From her pocket, she pulled out a folded notebook. Inside were passages of Latin she had copied by hand. Seneca, Cicero, words about virtue, resilience, and power. She whispered them softly, letting them steady her breathing. This was her refuge. This was her secret. She didn't know yet that the world was about to test everything she believed. Part 2. The Billionaire. The front doors of the Gilded Lily opened just after 8, and a hush rippled through the dining room. Conversations softened. Forts paused midair. Even the waitstaff straightened their posture as if responding to an invisible command. Harrison Sterling had arrived. He didn't need to announce himself. His presence did the work. The tailored charcoal suit, the effortless stride, the subtle confidence of a man who had never been told no long enough for it to matter. People recognized him immediately. The billionaire tech founder whose face appeared on magazine covers and financial news segments. His wealth was so vast it felt unreal, like a myth people whispered about rather than understood. He took a seat near the center of the restaurant, where he could be seen from almost every angle. The manager personally escorted him to the table, smiling too hard, bowing slightly. Harrison nodded once, already bored. Ellie was assigned to his section. She felt it before she saw him. The shift in the room, the tension in the air. When she approached his table, her hands tightened around her notepad. She reminded herself to stay calm, to stay invisible, to get through the night. "Good evening," she said softly. "May I start you with?" He cut her off with a raised hand. "Water," he said. "Still, not sparkling. Try to remember that." His date, a young woman in a sleek black dress, laughed lightly, as if it were a joke. Ellie nodded and turned away, heat rising to her cheeks. When she returned, he examined the glass as though expecting it to be flawed. "You people never get things right," he said casually. "It's fascinating, really." Ellie forced a smile. She had learned not to respond. Silence kept her safe. As the evening went on, Harrison filled the table with stories of private jets, hostile takeovers, and parties on yachts bigger than buildings. Every sentence was a performance. Every word demanded admiration. His date listened, wide-eyed, hanging on to his every phrase. She nodded when he spoke, laughed when he paused, and watched him like he was the center of the universe. Ellie stood nearby, refilling glasses, clearing plates, absorbing every insult like a sponge. Then Harrison shifted the conversation. "Do you speak any languages?" he asked his date. "A little French," she said. He smirked. "That's cute." Then, without warning, he began speaking in Latin. The words were clumsy. The grammar was wrong. But he spoke with confidence, like a man convinced that sounding intelligent mattered more than being correct. He leaned back in his chair and said, loud enough for Ellie to hear, "It's a dead language. Only scholars and real intellectuals understand it." She wouldn't. His date laughed. Ellie froze where she stood. Every instinct told her to walk away, to pretend she heard nothing, to protect herself. But the words he spoke, about power, about superiority, about people born to serve, cut deeper than anything he had said before. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She turned, and in clear, perfect Latin, she corrected him. The effect was instant. The table went silent. Nearby guests turned their heads. The pianist faltered, then stopped playing entirely. Harrison stared at her, disbelief written across his face. She continued, calmly explaining the proper grammar, the true meaning of his words and the philosophical context behind them. Then she met his eyes and said, softly but firmly, "You speak like a man who memorized words, but never learned wisdom." For the first time that night, Harrison Sterling had nothing to say. His face tightened. His jaw clenched. His date looked between them, unsure whether to laugh or run. Ellie felt something she hadn't felt in years. Power. She turned and walked away, her hands shaking, her heart racing. She had crossed a line she could never uncross. She didn't yet know the cost. Part 3. Psychological War. Ellie didn't see Harrison Sterling for several minutes after the exchange, but she felt his presence everywhere. It clung to the room like static after lightning, heavy and charged. Every time she passed his table, her chest tightened. Not with fear, but with the knowledge that she had wounded something far more dangerous than pride. Harrison sat very still, swirling the wine in his glass. He no longer spoke loudly. His date tried to restart the conversation, but he barely responded. His eyes followed Ellie with unsettling focus, as if he were dissecting her, looking for the fracture in her armor. He wasn't embarrassed anymore. He was calculating. Ellie returned to the service station and leaned against the counter, forcing herself to breathe normally. Her hands trembled. She reminded herself why she was here. Her mother, the hospital, the bills stacked on her kitchen table. This job was not optional. It was survival. She whispered a line from Seneca under her breath. Power reveals character. The manager brushed past her, tense. "What did you say to that table?" he hissed. "Nothing inappropriate," Ellie replied quietly. He studied her, unsure whether to believe her, then walked away. Across the room, Harrison stood. He adjusted his jacket, reached into the inner pocket, and brushed his fingers against his credit card. He felt its smooth edge and smirked faintly. A thought had formed, slow and deliberate, like poison spreading through water. Ellie continued working, unaware of the trap closing around her. Minutes later, Harrison rose from his seat and his voice cut through the restaurant. "My card is gone." The room froze. He turned, pointing directly at Ellie. She took it. Gasps rippled through the dining room. The manager rushed over. Security stepped forward. Ellie felt the floor tilt beneath her. "I didn't," she whispered. Her voice sounded small in the growing storm. Her heart slammed against her ribs as faces around her twisted with suspicion. Harrison's lips curved in a calm, controlled smile. "Check her. I saw her near my jacket." Ellie's world narrowed. If they fired her, she lost everything. If they believed him, her life collapsed in seconds. She stood frozen, unable to speak, as the weight of power crushed down on her. Then a voice cut through the noise. "Stop!" Dr. Eleanor Ashford stepped forward from her table, eyes steady, voice calm. "I saw him place the card into his jacket." Silence. Harrison turned slowly. The color drained from his face. Dr. Ashford repeated herself. Clear, unshaken. The manager looked between them. Security hesitated. Harrison's date stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. She stared at him, disgust in her eyes, then walked out without a word. The truth had exposed him. His power evaporated. Ellie felt her knees weaken as the room slowly returned to life. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked again. But something fundamental had changed. Harrison Sterling was no longer untouchable, and Ellie Bennett was no longer invisible. Part 4. The Aftermath. The restaurant never fully recovered its rhythm that night. Even as conversations restarted and servers moved again, something fragile had been broken. People kept glancing toward Harrison's empty chair as if expecting him to return, but he never did. He left without a word, without a fight, without the confidence that once followed him like a shadow. Ellie stood near the service station, her body still buzzing with adrenaline. Her legs felt weak, her heartbeat unsteady. She kept replaying the moment in her mind, the accusation, the fear, the voice that saved her. Dr. Ashford approached her quietly. There was no drama in her expression, only a gentle certainty. "You handled yourself with remarkable composure," she said. Ellie swallowed hard. "I didn't feel composed." Dr. Ashford smiled softly. "Courage rarely feels calm." They spoke in hushed tones while the restaurant continued around them. Dr. Ashford revealed she had recognized Ellie's Latin immediately. She had been watching from the beginning, curious, then impressed, then concerned. "You belong in a classroom," she said. "Not here." Those words struck deeper than anything Harrison had said. Ellie felt something shift inside her, like a door opening to a world she thought was closed forever. Dr. Ashford offered her a paid teaching assistant position at Columbia. She promised recommendations, grants, support. Ellie's breath caught. For the first time in years, someone wasn't taking from her. They were investing in her. When her shift ended, Ellie untied her apron slowly. She folded it with care and placed it on the counter. There was no anger in her movement, no bitterness, only quiet resolve. She stepped outside into the cold night air, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. The noise of traffic, the distant sirens, the hum of life, it all felt different now. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was rising. Part 5, A New Dawn. Ellie walked through the streets of Manhattan, the winter air sharp against her cheeks, yet exhilarating. The city had always felt like a cage. The crowded sidewalks, the relentless noise, the invisible hierarchy of wealth and power. She had accepted it as her life. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, she walked like someone reborn. Her thoughts swirled. Hours ago, she had been terrified, accused, powerless, on the brink of losing everything. And now, she had survived. She had triumphed without raising her voice, without violence, without anger. The world had seen her brilliance, and for the first time, she had seen herself. She thought of her mother, lying in a hospital bed, fighting a battle that wasn't fair. And Ellie realized something. This victory wasn't just hers. It belonged to the people who had been underestimated, dismissed, told they were invisible. It belonged to everyone who had been taught to accept less because others demanded more. She stopped on a bridge, looking over the dark waters of the river. The city lights glittered on the surface like broken stars. She could feel the weight of her past falling away. The long nights, the exhausting double shifts, the endless fear of failure. All of it had prepared her for this moment, had sharpened her, had revealed the depth of her resolve. Her phone buzzed with a message from Dr. Ashford. It contained the details of her new position, a teaching assistantship, grant applications, and letters of recommendation. Ellie smiled and tucked it into her pocket. It wasn't just opportunity. It was recognition. It was validation of years of quiet struggle, of intelligence hidden behind an apron. She walked past the street vendors, past the glowing signs of diners and shops. The city felt alive with possibility. She felt it too. Every step was lighter than the last. Every breath was fuller, deeper, freer. Harrison Sterling's defeat lingered in her mind, not as revenge, not as satisfaction, but as a lesson. Power is fleeting. Arrogance blinds. Ego is fragile. And knowledge, courage, and composure. Those are weapons no wealth can buy. She thought back to the moment she corrected him in Latin. The calm precision of her words, the shock in his eyes, the silence that followed. That single instant had changed everything. Ellie realized she had finally claimed her own narrative. No one else would define her worth. No one else would dictate the measure of her intelligence, her dignity, her future. She was in control, and it was intoxicating. As she walked further, she whispered to herself the Latin phrases that had guided her through hardship. Virtus et patientia, virtue and patience. Sapientia vincit, wisdom conquers. Each word grounded her, reminded her of who she was and who she would become. The city stretched endlessly before her, full of unknowns and opportunities. Ellie felt hope, not naive, not fragile, but strong, deliberate, and earned. For the first time in her life, she believed she could face anything and rise above it. And in that moment, she asked herself, and anyone listening to her story, questions that would linger long after the lights dimmed. How many times have you been underestimated? How often have others tried to define your limits? What powers lie hidden inside you, waiting for the right moment? And when the world challenges you, will you remain invisible, or will you rise? Ellie Bennett had chosen her answer, and so can you.